Welcome to the latest World Cup date, June 17th, and we have two groups that have completed their 3 group stage matches. Jason Longshore, Kelly Francis with you today to get you caught up. 4 games today. We're not going to go through them like we usually do because there were really only a couple that had a whole lot of meaning here. Let's start with Group B, Kelly, and Germany win their 3rd game of the group. They win the group. They win 4-0 over South Africa. Completely expected result. They seem to be a team that started a little slow in the tournament with the 1-0 win over China, but they've gotten better each time out, and they feel like a team that will have to be reckoned with to win this thing.
Absolutely. I 100% agree on that. So, we're now looking at a Germany team that's 19 matches unbeaten. Like you said, they started really slow. It was sort of uncharacteristic of the way we expected Germany to start the tournament. But I feel like, as Jess normally always says, it's about getting the team hot at the right time. And, they make it through the group stage and they win the group stage. And now it's just about facing your next opponent, preparing for that, and then trying to keep the momentum going forward. As you could tell when you watched that match, it really felt like Germany was finally getting their attack together, that they were more gelled from player to player. It really, honestly, was a one-way match the entire game, so they didn't really have much to go against from South Africa, but it will be interesting to see if they can keep this sort of energetic momentum going forward.
Yeah, the Germans so often in tournaments, whether it's the men or the women, they get a little bit of a slow start and they just build throughout the event. And, I mean, this is a group that hasn't conceded a goal yet. They had that little bit of a scare against China. But then they took care of Spain and dominated that match, and the South Africa game was expected. We'll see who they could be facing in the next round. When you start to look ahead at the bracket as teams get filled in, they'll be facing a third-place team. It could be Nigeria if they get through. It could be potentially someone else. So we'll have to keep an eye. The third-place teams are going to be the wild cards here. They're really awkward to predict. And one third-place team that we do know is going through is China. It was a scoreless draw with Spain. No real shock in the result because Spain was coming in as the number 2 team in the group. China was the 3rd. Spain, as the number 2 team, will play the winner of the United States group. I don't think China really wanted that, so they didn't really have much initiative in this match.
Yeah, you don't really want to push to play against, a Sweden or a USA, which are obviously powerhouses. China's been in this tournament, I think, 9 cycles now, so they're aware of how it works and how you sort of end up who you end up with, as anybody would. But yeah, I don't know if you have much motivation going into a game against Spain, realizing the winner of that will be slotted against most likely the USA. So I don't think that necessarily sits in anybody's tactic for a national team. You'd always think you'd want to put your best foot forward, but what do I know? Maybe sometimes they're like, maybe we don't need to press as much as we normally would. But they definitely, it just was not the most exciting game to watch. It was sort of level, but also Spain held most of the possession. So it was just, it's kind of what I think out of all of the games that was played today, it was probably the most lackluster, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of bracketed in to be this way. Like, China had one shot. There's no initiative for them to go forward here. They'd kind of rather be the third-place team and see who they get. And that's where it starts to get interesting because you have 4 third-place teams out of 6 that are going through. And there's all kinds of different permutations that it depends on which groups have third-place teams that go through as to who plays who. China right now as the third-place team out of Group B. We look ahead, they could play either the first-place team from Group C, which gets really interesting tomorrow, and we'll get into that here in a minute. Italy, Brazil, or Australia are all possible for that. And that would be a better matchup. Even any of those 3 would be a better matchup right now than the United States, the way they've played in this tournament.
Yeah. No, I think if you're China looking at those three opponents, you're looking at them and thinking you have a shot. I mean, we saw that when they played against Germany. You know, they have the ability to disrupt these powerhouse teams and disrupt their pace and how they move forward. And China can do that with either of those teams. I mean, you're especially if we're looking at a Brazilian team or an Australian team who are fast on the ball and like to counterattack and use their skill on the ball, then yeah, you're gonna be able to do a lot more with them or going against them than you would be a USA team. But yeah, it should be really interesting to see what they match up against and then how they use their possession to, like I said, disrupt the game. I'd be interested to see if they use the same sort of tactics that they used against Germany.
Yeah, out of all the different possibilities for China, it is almost definitely that they'll be matched up with the winner of Group C. There is one possibility they play the winner of Group D, which is likely going to be England. So we'll stay tuned to see where China ends up. The really weird match to me was in Group A. The France-Nigeria game, 1-0 France wins. Craziness with refereeing and VAR and goalkeepers and penalty kicks. We can get through the other one real quick. Norway 2-1 over South Korea. South Korea made it more interesting than I thought they would. They got a goal late to pull it back to 2-1, but they really struggled to keep up the pace in this tournament. Norway hasn't been talked about very much. I feel like Norway's a team that could pull some surprises in the knockout round.
I would agree with that. I feel like they're sort of flying under the radar right now, which might be good for them, honestly. Then that's less pressure. That's less pressure. That's less attention going to you by the media or by expectations. Yeah, they have the ability to bring the speed on the wings and obviously in the attack. But what I thought was most interesting is that, I mean, especially with the game with South Korea, right? So South Korea made it a little bit interesting with the goal that they had against Norway. And by the way, what a great combination goal between those two strikers. It was sort of a really fun lead up to the goal and also showed the skill that the South Korean players have when they do that, have the ball at their feet. But it just sort of sucked that South Korea was sloppy in the box and that both of the goals that they conceded from Norway were penalties. I mean, that just shows that the defense for South Korea just needs a lot of work, obviously. But no, yeah, I would agree with you. Norway's flying under the radar. And if I'm Norway, I'm going to let that ride as much as possible. Maybe down the road, shock some people with the results that you hammer out.
They've got a favorable draw, too. When you look at how the bracket worked out, and that's what's weird about a 24-team tournament. You have a round of 16 match with two group runners-up facing each other. So Norway, as most group runners-up, have to face a group winner. Norway doesn't. They'll play the runners-up in Group C, which, again, is chaos, and we'll get to that in a second with Italy, Brazil, and Australia. Let's talk France. France has not looked great in this tournament since day one. They got a late goal to beat Norway on a questionable penalty that VAR was involved in. They get a late goal to defeat Nigeria on a less questionable foul. I think it should have been called on the field. And
it should have been called on the field. Yeah.
You have to call that. And if you don't, this is where people get frustrated with VAR. But then it gets even better when Wendy Renard shoots wide, but the goalkeeper steps off the line, and I've seen this estimated at 2 inches off the line, 1 inch off the line, half an inch off the line, but her heel was in the air. It was super close, but with it being VAR, and I've seen a lot of people say, well, it was just barely off the line. VAR in this situation, it's like offside. It is yes or no. There's no barely gets to go. It's yes or no, and that's the ruling. The one thing I want to make sure that I keep reiterating about this, I cannot stand the automatic yellow card for a goalkeeper who steps off their line early, and I cannot stand that video assistant referees in a situation can intervene when the goalkeeper steps off the line, or if the kicker stops in their run-up, they can intervene then. They cannot intervene for encroachment into the 18.
Yeah, the rules are. I would so first off, yes, the yellow for obviously the goalie coming off of her line is just ridiculous in my mind.
Gwen gets
They've already
really
made the
upset about
mistake.
these yellow cards too, if you can hear.
Oh, what? Yeah.
Not a fan of the
her
yellow
and
cards.
Jess. Her and
Yes.
Jess. Jess was, lighting up the chat. Just it's salt in the wounds. You've already stepped off the line. You already have to retake the penalty, right? So you're already in this mental state where you're already, scrounging around and trying to, set yourself back up again. And then, on top of it, you get a yellow. It's not like this is where 100% the gray area should be included, I think, in this. I know that the measurement of a few inches off or not inches off, that's sort of tricky, but I feel like there's got to be a point where like a yellow is only given if it's like extremely intentionally off her line.
Yes.
When it's so close and you're not looking down at your feet when you're trying to save a penalty, that's just not happening. Bodies naturally move forward to try and stop something. When you're falling, you naturally move forward. So your body movement is already going in a forward, direction. So trying to remember to keep your feet on a line, but in a forward momentum is just so crazy in my mind. But to penalize somebody for that, no, that's ridiculous. And then I don't understand it shouldn't be automatic. No, that's something I agree on. It should not be automatic unless the only time I think a yellow should be given at that point is if it's a ridiculous amount that they're obviously trying to get an advantage.
Sure.
Yes.
Just can't be automatic because it's a situation where, all right, the goalkeeper is trying to time it. They mistime it. And especially in a case like this one where you could see, I thought what she actually was trying to do was she started almost right behind the line and kind of took a little bit of a step up. That's why I thought initially when I looked at it that her heel was on the line, but it was just off. But she's not trying to, get an unfair advantage. She's trying to time the kick. So if you mistime it, it's an automatic yellow, and that doesn't feel fair because what's going to happen when we get into a penalty shootout to decide a knockout round match? And a goalkeeper, let's say a goalkeeper was wasting time in extra time to try to get it to penalties because they're just hanging on. A team that's an underdog is just hanging on. They get a yellow for wasting time. They go to the shootout, and they step off the line too early, and they get a second yellow, and then they get sent off, and then you have to put a field player in goal, and then everybody is losing their minds. That's going to happen. That might happen next week.
And not to mention that, but you have to realize that we've had more penalties this go-round than I think I've ever seen in a World Cup before. So when you have more goalkeepers trying to save more penalties, you're going to end up having more yellow cards. And then you've also got yellow card accumulation, right? So if they're having to save penalties almost every match and they mess up once and then they end up messing up twice, then they're not in the next game. And that, to me, is absolutely ridiculous. When you include obviously the attention of VAR and the fact that everything's now being watched, but you also now penalize something that they didn't even know that they were doing, it's going to end up being really bad, and it's going to have a really bad look on not only the system, but also on the referees. It's absolutely ridiculous. An automatic yellow should be removed. I don't know how I made it, but it made it.
Yeah, that's just a bad addition to the laws of the game. And to be clear, that's not a VAR thing. The automatic yellow has been written into the laws of the game. It was part of the change from the penalty rule that we've all known growing up, that a goalkeeper's supposed to keep 2 feet on the line. They're not supposed to be able to move off the line. Although we've seen Brianna Scurry almost come out to the edge of the 6 on penalties before in shootouts. It's one that referees kind of gave a little bit of leeway. Now they've rewritten it to say, okay, you only have to have 1 foot on the line, but if you jump early, you're getting a yellow. The automatic yellow part in the laws of the game is terrible. VAR not being able to rule on encroachment is terrible in my opinion, because now VAR is only looking at two aspects of a penalty, not another one that would result in a retake. Because if you go back and look at the Wendy Renard penalty that was brought back with the goalkeeper's foot off the line, 3 French players had encroached. But they can't, unless the referees on the field deal with it, the VAR cannot. And that's frustrating. If VAR can get involved in some aspects of a penalty, they should be involved in all aspects of a penalty.
Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of relooking at the rules written and what VAR is in charge of and what VAR has the ability to look over and whatnot after this. I mean, we sort of saw a little bit of the issues with VAR in particular in the Men's World Cup, but now with the new laws that are out, I would have way too complicated and also unnecessary.
I agree. I think sometimes when they try to redo these rules, and it's just a different world now than it was 10 years ago when they were rewriting rules with the laws of the game and they'd make a big change. Now it's immediately being basically put to trial with video assistant referees because you're not missing anything. So the intent of a rule is, I think it's being like kind of magnified at times. So the handball rule is very difficult now, even though they tried to give it more clarity. I think they've made it more difficult. And now this rule with VARs now involved on the penalty part of it, because that hadn't happened until these rules took effect. And I think the U20 World Cup was officially the first time that you saw this. That's why we haven't seen this in MLS, for example, and we won't till next year.
Right.
It's too much, and it's something that IFAB has to work quicker now to make adjustments. They've been very slow to make changes to the laws of the game. Now with VAR magnifying things, they have to work faster to fix these things almost in real time.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what changes after this. And obviously this is world stage tournament, and a lot of issues have started becoming very apparent. And it feels like after every single match that has been played in this World Cup, there's been talk about calls and referees and yellow cards and penalties not shootouts, but penalties taken, things like of that measure. So
we'll have the penalty shootouts here soon.
Yeah.
I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's not going to be great. But we're looking at obviously all of the issues that you would have ended up coming up or up against anyway, but they're just being magnified right now. So it will be really interesting to see, like I said, what happens after this tournament.
Okay, before we get into the permutations of everything with this result, we have to talk about Nigeria's goalkeeper again, because she was outstanding. Chiamaka Inadozie was really, really good in this one. And she came into it, and she had a quote yesterday and said, I know they will feel relaxed. I think that they will they will think that maybe they will score more than 8 goals. And she said it's going to be a tough game. They're one of the best teams in the competition, but we are letting them know it's not going to be like that again. And it wasn't. And she was a huge part of it. And to only give up a goal on a second penalty after getting the clean sheet against South Korea, youngest goalkeeper to do that in Women's World Cup history, what an absolute performance from her.
I mean, not only that, but on the second penalty that was retaken, she went the right direction. Mm-hmm. She almost got a hand to it. So, you're looking at that also and thinking, this girl's got talent. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see with some of these smaller non-heavyweight teams, what players come out of it and sign contracts, things like that, because you're obviously being put under a magnifying glass. But yeah, she had a game. She really had a game. And you would expect France to come into this game and really sort of knock it out of the park. But Nigeria as a whole, like, the defense was great. They sort of got into France's head. They looked a little shaken, which was sort of interesting from France. You would expect for them to try and take this game in stride, but they didn't. And I got a lot of messages from a lot of people asking me if I overshot France, and I'm like,
I'm right
no,
there with you.
I don't think so. But I think what?
I'm right there with you. I got France to win it all, and I'm not all that convinced as of yet.
I'm not convinced either, but I think one of the things that we're dealing with France is I think the pressure is getting to them. It's something that I've said and people are like, they shouldn't have any pressure at all. But you have to realize that the men didn't win the World Cup in France. They won it in Russia. There is another level to expectations of winning a World Cup in your own country. So I think that they just need to sort of not focus on that. Maybe if they need to change their mindset, maybe they need to think to themselves, we're not the clear-cut favorites. Maybe we're not going to win. And in that way, they need to just prove everybody wrong.
Canada at the last Women's World Cup came in as a favorite, struggled. Brazil at the 2014 Men's World Cup, 7-1 semifinal. I mean, a lot of that is due to folding under the pressure of that moment. There's so many times when it happens. It's a different conversation all the way around. It can be a motivator. It can also hold you back. And right now it feels like it's holding France back. They're going to have an interesting matchup in the next round, and we'll talk about who they could face. Nigeria does have a shot to get through, and a lot of it is because of the defense. They've only conceded one goal since the 37th minute of game 1. They had a bad start to the tournament, but they've bounced back. They got 3 points with the win over South Korea. Their goal differential is -1. When you look at the third-place teams, China's already through on 4 points. Nigeria has now played their 3 games. They're on 3 points with a -1 goal differential. Australia tomorrow plays. They're on 3 points. They have a 0 goal differential. Beyond that, it's Argentina with 1 point. It's Cameroon with 0. It's Chile with 0. Nigeria actually has a pretty good shot of going through here, depending on what happens with the other groups.
I would agree. And I would think that would be something that you'd really want because they've never made it to the knockout rounds, right? So this would be history in the making for that Nigerian team. And you want that. And I think they really do have a shot. It'll be interesting to see the way the group stages, obviously final out, and how everything comes down to points and things like that. But they've got a really good shot. They really do.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with Argentina playing Scotland, with Cameroon and Chile playing winnable games, and we'll have to see where they finish up. Let's talk about tomorrow, because this is one that I think a third-place team's coming out of this. I just don't know who it's going to be, because it could be Italy, it could be Brazil, it could be Australia. All of them could win the group, too. That's what's so chaotic about this. The matches tomorrow, it's Jamaica and Australia, and Italy and Brazil. You would expect Australia to win and get to 6 points. Italy and Brazil, I am favoring the Italians.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know who my favorite is on that game. You kind of got me in a shock, but
the defense and the counterattacking. I've been so impressed with Italy.
Italy has been remarkable this World Cup cycle. They've really done their job. They've done their homework. They know how to disrupt the attack and pretty much any team they've faced so far. So yeah, having them as your pick is a good bet. I know when I started this, I was dogging on the Brazilians, and they on the first game they blew me out of the water. Second game wasn't as much as an intensity of proving myself wrong on the second one, but
good start. But then Australia came back and finally put it together.
Yes. So it'll be really interesting to see how those two teams face up, right? So Brazil with the attack and with their ability on the ball, and Italy with that defense, right?
Yeah, I think Italy comes in.
That's going to be a good game.
They know what they have to do. They come in, and if they get a draw, they win the group. And Italy, as just a soccer culture, playing defense first is second nature. So sitting back and looking for the counter and drawing Brazil in, I think they can hit them on the counter, but I think they can also shut down Brazil's attack. And, we do still have questions about Marta and Christian, because they both came off at halftime against Australia. What do they have in the tank for tomorrow? We don't know.
That's the very good point. We don't know. And I don't know why, you would have taken them off to begin with. You need Marta to have as fresh legs as you can going into the knockouts, and removing her after 45 minutes doesn't seem like a good bet in my mind. But yeah, it'll be interesting. So they're supposed to be well rested, so we'll see.
They're going to need to be, because I think what happens is Italy gets a result here. I think they at least get a draw, so they win the group. Australia wins and they get second, and then Brazil, if they get a draw, they're through into the knockout round, no question asked. If they lose, then goal differential comes in because Brazil comes in with a +2, and remember Nigeria's on a -1 with 3 points, so that's where it starts to get tricky. But when you look at who these teams could play, and this is where I wanted to finish up, the winner of Group C will go into a match against the third-place team from Group A or B. So they're going to play China most likely, but they could face Nigeria if things fall in a really weird way. The runner-up of Group C, which could be Australia, would go into that match with Norway, which would be an amazing match. That
would be an incredible game, yeah.
And the third-place team from this group, there is a very, very good chance that the third-place team from this group, and let's say it's Brazil, they go into a round of 16 match against France.
Oh,
that's what I said when I started looking at this. That was my reaction when I looked at the bracket, and I'm like, the third place team from this group's going to see France? Because if it's Australia, if it's Italy, which is possible if things get really weird, any of them against France, the way this tournament's
be a good
gone,
game.
Whew, it's not a walkover for France.
Mm-mm. And that's when we keep repeating it, and people keep rolling their eyes. But this is going to be one of the best World Cups anybody's ever seen because everybody on any given day has the ability to win the whole thing. They really do. If you play your cards right, you really do.
It feels like it's been heating up to this point. So it was a little bit of a slow start. We had some different highlights that jumped out. Getting a little more competitive. We're starting to see a little more of the tactics with the different teams that play as we get to know them. Now you're into the nitty-gritty with the final day of group stage. And when you get into these knockouts, some of the matchups in the round of 16 are going to feel like semifinal type of matchups. That's what's going to be fascinating about this.
They are. It's going to be a lot of fun to see. A lot of fun to see.
I'm looking forward to it. So tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Both games at the same time. It's Italy, Brazil. It's Jamaica, Australia. I'm thinking Italy wins the group, which I would have never thought I would have said coming into this tournament. I think they end up winning the group. That's my team that has shocked me the most in the event.
Yeah, they got a good shot. It'll be interesting to see what comes up, but these are the sort of group stages that you live for, right? Where anybody has the ability to win on the very last day.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really tight, but it's going to be a good game of a good week of watching soccer, but tomorrow specifically is going to be a really good day.
Yeah, it's one of those where you get 3 teams that could finish on 6 points, and it's just absolute chaos. So we'll be back tomorrow to wrap everything up. Make sure if you have any questions, if more crazy referee stuff happens, because it probably will, because that's how this tournament's gone, tweet at us, at Longshoe, at the Kelly Francis, at Jessica ATL UTD. Let us know what you're thinking about the tournament as it goes. If you think I'm crazy for picking Italy to win the group, yell at me. That's cool, too. We'll be back tomorrow on the SDH Network and with our friends north of the border on Barn Burner. Thanks for listening. Talk to you all tomorrow.